All right, so we are finishing chapter 3. Hopefully we'll finish the chapter today. Just to pick up where we left off, we kind of got cut off in the middle. Larry had come, he's not here now, but he'd come a little late, and he'd asked a question about worlds and creation, because I had mentioned that there are only two things in the world that are beyond creation, Torah and the soul of a Jew. And then we had begun to discuss how creation itself can connect to holiness. Started to discuss how in this physical world is the purpose of all of creation. All the worlds came into existence, are coming into existence at every moment in order that to be this world, because this world is the desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that here he should be revealed. And all the other worlds are just a means that this world should come about. And so this world, Torah is the blueprint of creation. And this world comes about, Torah gives life to the world, and also the world comes about through the 10 utterances of Torah. And that comes in through creation. But nevertheless, creation can be, even though this world is a very low world, right? Mm-hmm. There are spiritual worlds. There's the spiritual world of Asiya we're talking about. That's where there are angels, and there's the connection between, even though we've said like there's an infinite gap between finite and infinite. Right? The spiritual worlds above, even though they have form, they're spiritual. How can they connect to physical? That's mafli lasos, like we say in the bracha of Asher Yatzor at the end. Hashem does wonders. He connects the physical with the spiritual. Yet there has to be some type of form in the spiritual in order to connect to the physical. That's already the lowest level of the spiritual. And then there's higher levels of the spiritual, higher worlds that are still part of creation, where there's less and less form. Less like in the nefesh ha'adam, in the soul of man. So action is the result of a person's understanding and their feelings, and when they act. So action is the most separate thing from the person's nefesh, really. I mean, the nefesh expresses itself through the body, but when a person is using his arms or his legs, right? So it's more external. It's more external to the person. It's a force that he has. He knows how to use his body, right? When a child is born, it takes him a little bit of time to figure out how to use his body, right? Mm. We learn how to use our body. We live in our body. We use our body. Our body serves us, right? But we're not our body. We're our nefesh, our life force. The life force is higher than the body, right? There's the physical body, and there's the physical part of there's the spiritual part of the nefesh that's connected to action, right? Like a person can write. He can write, and there are people that are artists. So that power of their nefesh expresses itself in their fingertips. Some people more, some people less. And then there's the higher level of the person, which is his feelings. And then there's even higher than the feelings, which is his thoughts. So too in worlds above, there's feelings, there's thoughts. And as you get into thoughts are more spiritual. When a person learns Torah, even if he's not learning Torah, if he's learning something that interests him, he loses himself, becomes totally involved in that which he's learning, he becomes totally absorbed in it. So too in the spiritual worlds of Bria, where it's related, sometimes it's described as the world of thought, where Yetzirah is described as the world of feeling. And then Asiya is described as the world of action. So there, the created beings, the created existences, the angels, are just so connected with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just like when a person's learning something, they're so connected with that which what they're learning, right? You have to sometimes remind them, hey, you have to eat. Come in and eat, or come and do this, because they're very involved. So, even though a non-Jew doesn't have a nefesh elokis, doesn't have a godly soul, which is a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As we said, there's two things in this world that are above this world. That's the godly soul of a Jew and Torah. Even though a Gentile doesn't have a godly soul, the human soul has the ability to connect to godliness. And that's the answer to the question that he was asked. That it's not that the Gentiles would be insulted. I mean, I'm sure there would be certain Gentiles that would be insulted, but everyone needs to know what they're here for, what their mission is, right? I mean, there's certain people that are probably insulted that they're not a Kohen. Right? Why can't I go up and do him? Why do I have to be the recipient? Why can't I be the one giving the blessings? I'm not a Kohen. Not a Kohen. This is expressed, like we said in the previous lessons, that we saw we saw throughout history that Jews are willing to give up their life for Kodesh Baruch Hu. Even though they went through their life up to a certain point, up to that point where they were faced with that test of having to worship idols or give up their life, up till that point they didn't care about Torah mitzvahs. It wasn't expressed in their thought, speech, or deed. They were living in this world, and that's where they had their geschmack. That's where they had their satisfaction from things of this world. That's where their desires were, their goals were. Whatever their goals were in this world, all of a sudden they're willing to give it their life for the Judaism. It's not something that makes sense. And the reason it doesn't make sense, I mean, it makes sense, right? But it's not, they don't do it. They don't give up their lives because of some thought process they go through. It's just, I can't do that. All of a sudden they become aware of who they really are. I'm connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I do not want to sever that connection. And all of a sudden, all the folly of the animal soul that covers up, like we've been discussing for the past few shurim, that the animal soul covers up, that's the folly. A person doesn't sin unless a spirit of folly enters him. All of a sudden, that folly doesn't have any ability to fool him anymore. All of a sudden, he realizes, wow, if I worship idols, I'm cutting myself off from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm a Jew. I'm not willing to do that. That's something that's beyond seichel. And a Jew is commanded to give up his life rather than worship idols. Actually, a command in the Torah. He's not doing it because it's a command in the Torah. It is a command in the Torah, but that's not how he's doing it. He's not opening up the Rambam and saying, well, in this particular situation, does it apply? He's not learning the sugya to see, does it apply? He feels it. He recognizes it because of awareness, a conscious awareness that I can't do this act. Even though his heart wouldn't be in the act, and his mind wouldn't be in the act, and his belief wouldn't be in the act, nevertheless, he can't do the act of bowing down to an idol. He just can't do it. While a Gentile is not commanded to give up his life. He's not commanded to give up his life. He's commanded not to worship idols. It's one of the 7 mitzvahs. He has to believe in a Kodesh Baruch Hu. All the 7 mitzvahs of the Gentiles are framed in the negative. Don't do this, don't do that, don't worship idols. But if you take the flip side, what does it mean, don't worship idols? You have to come to a recognition about who is the master of the world. If it's not the idols, right? The idol worshippers are saying the sun is the master, the moon is the master, the stars are the master, this power, the bank manager, okay? My boss. So if they're not the master, who is the master? Shalom Aleichem, the Lord, Shalom, totally wrote those. So the flip side is you have to learn about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why while a Gentile is not supposed to learn Torah, he's supposed to learn Torah that's connected to him, connected to his mitzvahs. He has 7 mitzvahs. One of them is not to worship idols. Therefore, he has to learn about the oneness of Hashem. That the true power in the world is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we should nullify our will to the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's applicable, Kol Tuv. That's applicable to Jews and non-Jews alike. Nevertheless, Gentiles not required to give his life for that mitzvah. Why? Because his life is part of this creation. So in creation, in a created being, the difference between a created being and a godly being is a godly being doesn't have any sense of itself. It's godly. It's part of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Right? In the world of Atzilus, and that's where the neshamas of the Jews are born, from Malchus of Atzilus, the lowest level of Atzilus is where the neshamas are born. Malchus is feminine, Chochmah is masculine, right? The tzaddikim come from Chochmah. But even the neshamas of the tzaddikim are born in Malchus. All the neshamas are born in Malchus. Even they may come from Chochmah. The Chochmah, in general, Atzilus, Chochmah is we call it knowledge, we call it wisdom, but it's riyat elukus, it's perception of the divine. And when there's a that's Atzilus. That's what basically is Mafyan Atzilus, categorize Atzilus, that there's a perception of divinity. Even in the lowest level of Atzilus, which is Malchus, there's no feeling of me. Only feeling of me comes into existence from creation downward. From the first existence of creation, which is the highest world, highest level of Bria, the highest level, even there, even though the spiritual beings there are totally united with their source, and they want to become kalul in their source. They want to lose their existence, right? And some do. That's what the seraphim are. They burn. The angels that burn. Some they burn and they burn out. They become absorbed, and then Hashem puts them and creates them again. Nevertheless, it's a feeling of I want to be. I want to come close. In Atzilus, there's no feeling of I want to. There's no I. The I only comes into being from creation. And it could be a very holy I, but it's still an I. A tzaddik is a very, very holy person, right? But it's him that's serving Hashem. There's a Misha Oived, there's a person that's serving. But since the neshama of a Jew, right, there's an external body, okay? And then there's an animal soul, which is connected with the body. It's a spiritual force that's connected with the body. HaKadosh Baruch Hu connects the spiritual life force with the body. And that spiritual life force gives the body life. Without a spiritual life force, the body is a cadaver. The body is not alive. There's a spiritual life force that goes into the physical flesh, that turns that physical flesh from a chemical recipe of molecules, like everything else in the physical world, into a living being. And every, not just man is a living being. There's animals. They have a nefesh. The nefesh is different. They have a life force. The life force of a cat is not the life force of a human being, but they have a life force. You see, they have a life force. They feel, and they even have a certain seichel, right? They know how to get their food. They know where to hide. They know how to protect themselves. They know how to procreate, right? And some of them can be even quite. You can see intelligence, right? A chimpanzee can take a stick and stick it into a hole of a tree for the ants to crawl on it, and then he'll just eat the ants off the stick. Or an animal can sometimes, a beaver, right? Beavers build homes, right? They know how. They have a certain seichel. And gave them that seichel. But they're animals. They do it because that's how they're programmed. Hashem programmed them that they know what they need and they know how to get what they need. The human life force, the highest life force of this world. There's even life force in vegetables. There's even life force in the physical. But the life force in the physical, we don't see it. It's hidden. It's completely hidden. Right? There's a life force. If you actually see an atom, you look at an atom, I don't think you can actually see the atom, but you can see the properties of the atom, and there's a lot of energy going on. There's energy that's being absorbed, emitted. There's energy being absorbed. It's changing in its energy levels all the time. There's stuff happening. It's teeming with life. What's causing that life? The divine utterances. It says, "Ye or." The Kodesh Baruch Hu's energy that comes through creation is giving life to everything, even to the physical. But there's levels, right? There's the physical and the vegetable, and then the animal, and then there's man. And the life force of man is the highest life force in this world. But it all comes from within creation, except for the soul of a Jew. And therefore, a Jew is required to give up his life, and he gives up his life without even thinking about it. Because when someone giving up one's life is the ultimate sacrifice that one could make. It's the ultimate sacrifice, right? I could give money. A person could give a kidney, but to give up their life, that's what they recognize as their consciousness. They're alive. Give up their life. So a Gentile is not commanded to give up his life. And the reason a Gentile is not commanded to give up his life is because he's part of creation. And being that he's part of creation, there's an I. There's an I. There's a certain ego. But a Jew, since he's not part of creation, his divine soul comes from godliness. It's a part of godliness. Therefore, when there's a test of idolatry, all of a sudden that spark of godliness that's maybe hidden in his whole life inside of him, and it was never ignited. All of a sudden, boom, it gets ignited, and it just takes over. And he says, I can't. I'm part of godliness. I can't do this because I understand that would separate me from godliness. It's not even an intellectual. It's not even an intellect. It's just a consciousness. I heard once a shaliach came from Timbuktu. I think it was Timbuktu. What's the name of that country in between China and Tibet? Maybe in Tibet.
And Nepal.
Huh? No, it was from the Tibet. What's the Tibet? What's the name of that city? Kathmandu.
Yeah.
Kathmandu. A shaliach came from what was his name? Came from Kathmandu. Forgot his name. But his father was in the Kehillah in Beitar. His father's a great person. His father's a Sefer Stam. His father wrote the tefillin for one of my children, wrote the Parshiyot, and it wasn't ready on time. My son now has to put on tefillin, but it wasn't ready on time. I ordered it close to the deadline. I don't know, there were certain things that happened in his life that he didn't get it ready on time. So you know what he did? He gave his tefillin. He said, let your son will put on my tefillin. In another week it'll be ready. I'll borrow tefillin from him. That's what my son did. It's very nice. I don't think every person would do that. So his son, or son-in-law, was the shaliach in Timbuktu. And he spoke in our shul at a kiddush, at a hitvadut, at a farbrengen. And he said, all the Israelis say the same thing. They all come, they visit, they travel around, they go up to the gurus, they get involved, they go there, they check it out. When it comes time to bow, they don't bow. They don't bow. They're not religious. They're after the army, they're secular, they want to now clear their heads, get some, and they want also spirituality, because because ironically, unfortunately, even though they grew up in the land of Israel, they didn't get spirituality. They don't know what it is. They may know what it is, but they don't really know what it is. They don't internally know what it is. They hear things, they see things, and maybe
That's because they were raised with the spirituality around them, and they don't realize what it is until they're without it.
they're raised with it.
They're raised with it. It's part of their life, part of their part of who they are, and they don't realize the spirituality that they're searching for until after they go to someplace where it doesn't exist, and then the reality of what they were searching for and hoping for was with them all along.
That's correct.
And it's not available outside.
Outside of Torah mitzvahs.
That's right.
Right. But it's quite unfortunate that, I mean, you would expect someone's growing up in the Holy Land, Jewish person, they would be connected to Torah mitzvahs. But that's what Galus is exile, even in the land of Israel, is exile. We could see it in the way our leadership acts in a very irresponsible manner. Current events endangering the entire nation. Anyway, Mashiach should come and we should see revealed goodness and kindness and godliness in the world. To the end of exile already.
This very moment.
This very moment. So I forgot a phone call from this lady. She wanted to get, she does yoga and she wanted to get insurance in case someone gets hurt. I said, okay, you need to send me your documents. Where did you learn? Where did you study? She said, India. I said, India, interesting. And I said, can I ask you a personal question? She said, sure. I said, when you were in the ashram and it came time to bow, what happened? She said, oh, no, Jews didn't bow. She met her husband there. That's how she knew her husband was a Jew, because he didn't bow. That's how they met. So it just happens. It's a consciousness. All of a sudden that spark ignites. And that's a spark that's beyond creation. That's the need. So he said, okay, that's the spark that every Jew has. That's the yechida. That's the yechida. The highest level of the soul. It's in the Jew. The soul of a Jew is also called sometimes a boire b'tzurat nivra, the creator in the form of the created. So that soul of the Jew can be hidden and in golus and in exile, in a very, very deep exile, inside the nefesh of Bahamis. And if it doesn't perform, if it doesn't flex its muscles and become the balabas, become the boss, so the entire purpose that the world was created and that this Jewish person was created, he's not fulfilling the purpose. The purpose is to reveal the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How does a Jew reveal the HaKadosh Baruch Hu? He understands, I have to live the way a Jew should live. I have to live a life of Torah mitzvahs. The holiness of Torah mitzvahs should infuse my being. And I should now become the balabas, the boss of my nefesh Bahamis. And I can take now the ox and I can put a yoke on the ox and I can do a lot of great things with the power that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me. But if the nefesh of Bahamis is the balabas, the nefesh of Bahamis wants physical pleasures, like an animal. An animal's interested in its needs. Nefesh Bahamis of a person wants physical pleasures, even though that might not be his needs. But that's just a quirk that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put in man, in order that man should be able to choose good and not choose evil. Evil is not only in a moral context that I have to choose good, and it's immoral to murder, rape, steal, right? So therefore I have to protect life. So try to embellish life, be honest, right? Be a mensch, right? That's one type of morality. That's one type of good and evil. Another type is Even in the animal soul, right? You look at an animal eats what it needs to survive. An animal doesn't eat foods that are unhealthy to it. Animals left on their own, they don't die in the wild of disease. They don't have illnesses in the wild. They die. They get eaten. Or they get injured in a fight. But, it's a struggle to survive out there in the jungle. And man, in his struggle to survival in the world, he's supposed to act like a family. All men are supposed to act like a family. And everyone wants that. Everyone wants world peace, right? Just like everyone wants the hostages returned. Question is, what's the best way to go around it? What's the best way to go about getting it? If there's a lot of evildoers in the world, right? You reach out the olive branch to them, right? They'll bite off your arm. They'll literally bite off your arm. You have to deal with them with an iron fist. They're not interested in an olive branch. They declared very clearly they want to kill each and every Jewish person. That's their goal. So you have to protect yourself. You have to be smart. Just like Yaakov Avinu was smart when he went up to Lavan. He was smart, even though Lavan did deceive him. But he knew Lavan was a swindler, and he said to Rachel, like we said in the previous shiur, I'm going to protect myself. People sometimes say we shouldn't fall to their level. Well, that's true. A Jew should be on a high moral level all the time. But that's stupidity to think that when you're in a war, that you have mercy on your enemies. That's stupidity. When in a war, you fight to be victorious, and that your enemies should submit to your power and raise their hands and hold up the white flag, and then there's something to talk about. But if there's a war going on, you fight the war. Milchemet mitzvah, it's called in Torah. There's an obligatory war. When you're under attack, when your people are in danger, it's an obligation to go to war against your enemies.
Well, when the borders of Israel are threatened.
Exactly.
You have an obligation.
They have an obligation. Chasan mechupasa. You even take a chasan from his chuppah. You take a bridegroom from his wedding canopy. So that's the difference between bitul hayesh and bitul b'metzius. Bitul hayesh means I nullify myself. The Gentile is able to nullify himself. He's able to say, Hashem commanded me to keep 7 mitzvahs, and it's going to sometimes be difficult for me, but I have to control myself, and I have to keep these 7 mitzvahs, and I have to nullify myself. And a Jew also has to do the same thing. He has to nullify himself. Bittul b'metzius, there's nullifying myself, and bittul b'metzius means that I'm no longer in existence. My existence isn't a factor here. And that you see when a Jew gives up his life for Kodesh Baruch Hu, that his life, he's not in existence, and he's not saying, I am going to nullify myself because of Hashem's command to me. I'm going to restrain my desire to live. It's not like that. It just can't be any other way because of who he really is. That's built in the Metzius. That's total nullification. Once a story of the Alter Rebbe that he wanted to take leave of his teacher, the Maggid of Midrash. And he knocked on the Maggid's door, and the Maggid said, who is it? He said, Ich. I. It's I. Who is it? Ich. I. 4 or 5 times. He said, I. He realized the Maggid's not opening the door. He didn't understand what was going on, but he left. He had to leave. He was going on a journey. He was out of the town, and he wasn't too far already out of the city, and a Jew spotted him and said, hey, come, we need him. You're a 10th man. There's a bris now, we need a minion. So the Alter Rebbe said, sure. During the Sudas Mitzvah, a silver spoon was missing. Everyone knew everyone in the home. Everyone knew who everyone was. They were all good friends. And the only stranger was the Alter Rebbe. So they assumed that he was the thief. And they accused him, and he said, it is not I. And they accused him again. He said, no, it is not I. And they began to hit him. It is not I. It isn't I. It isn't I. Until the cook in the kitchen came out and said, I found the spoon. They stopped hitting him. He realized he has to go back to Midrash and figure out what's going on. So he asked his Rebbe, the Maamar. He says, how many times did you have to get hit in order to cancel out the I? Cancel out the I. So we have an I that we have to deal with. We have to deal with it. Yeah. All right. So we said that it's the nefesh bahamis which covers over the godly soul. The animal soul covers over the godly soul, because the godly soul only wants godliness. That's what it's interested in. And it flees from anything that is against godliness, like someone who flees from death. The baru loy nefesh elokis, because it's clear to the godly soul, the misa ruchanis rachmana litzlan, who kasha yaisa the misa gashmis mas v'shalom, that a spiritual death, chas v'shalom, may Hashem spare us, is worse than a physical death. We see a clear indication of this in the Torah itself. That the Torah says about someone who comes from the nation of Moab and Ammon, that they, after 3 generations, they're allowed to become part of the Jewish people. No, I'm sorry. That a Mitzri, an Egyptian, after 3 generations, is allowed to become part of the Jewish people. But a Moavi and an Ammoni, they're never allowed to become part of the Jewish people. And that's from Dvarim chapter 23. There's a pasuk over there. And Rashi over there explains, because the Mitzrayim, they killed us physically. But Moab, they killed us spiritually. Because when Bilam, the Rasha, was unsuccessful in cursing the Jewish people, so what did he instruct Balak, the king of Moab, to do? To cause us to sin in promiscuity, to cause us to sin. And they did. The whole plague broke out because the Jewish, some men amongst the Jewish people sinned with the Moabite women. So therefore we see that since Moab is never allowed to convert, yet a Mitzri is, that an Egyptian is, that it's causing a spiritual sin is a type of a spiritual death. It's worse than a physical death. This was the reason, one of the reasons given why Pliny Almoini, who was the inheritor of, he was the inheritor of the story of Ruth, story of the book of Ruth. So what was the name of the Jew that went out? There was a famine in the time of that period in history, and he went out with his 2 sons, and they married Moabite women, and then he died, and the 2 sons died, and then Ruth was one of the wives of one of the sons. And Naomi said to her, I'm going back to Eretz Yisrael. And the 2 daughters-in-law, so one stayed in Moab, and she became the forebearer of Goliath. Mm-hmm. And Ruth said to Naomi, where you go, I will go. Where you sleep, I will sleep. Your God is my God. I'm coming back with you. She was a righteous convert. We learn many of the ideas of conversion from that pasuk. Where you go, I will go. Where you sleep, I will sleep. How you live, I will live. She was from the nation of Moab. And then Naomi came back. And Ruth worked in the fields. And Boaz, he was one of the judges. He was a field owner. She worked in his field. And he was very gracious to her because he recognized she was a Ger Tzedek. And she had come back. She had made self-sacrifice to become part of the Jewish people. So he told his workers to make sure to leave over food that she should be able to take. And when Naomi saw that he was being gracious to her, she said that he is one of the inheritors. Go to him, lay at his feet. Shem alav rachmanis. And he woke up startled. There's a woman at his feet. And she said, take me to be your wife. And he wanted to, but he said, there's someone before me in line as an inheritor of the field. Because, Jewish laws of inheritance, they're detailed. And although Boaz was an inheritor, there was someone who was prior to him, and Boaz couldn't marry Ruth and become the inheritor of the field of her husband without this person first waiving his rights. So he made a beit din in the public fair, and he called this person over, and he told the person the situation. And they call the person in the Torah Ploni Almoni. That wasn't his real name. It was a Ganai on him. It was not it wasn't, he didn't want to marry. He didn't want to marry Ruth. And he gave over his rights to inherit the field by marrying Ruth, the Moabitess, the Moabite, the woman Moabite, over to Boaz in front of the Beis Din. And then Boaz married Ruth. Because he didn't want to do it, they call him Ploni Almoni. They don't say his real name because it's not, he should have done it. But he didn't want to do it. And one of the reasons given that he didn't want to do it is because of this pasuk in the Torah that says a Moabite is never allowed to enter the Kahal Hashem, is never allowed to convert. So Boaz explained that this pasuk is talking about a Moabite, but not a Moabitess, not a female Moabite. It's only talking about a male member of the Moab nation, but not a female member. And even though Boaz was the head of the Sanhedrin, and this was the tradition that the Sanhedrin had received from Moshe Rabbeinu, right? And this was the law. Nevertheless, this person felt that his shoulders aren't broad enough to be the first one to make that move. Because up until that time, it appeared no one had actually married a Moabitess and had instituted this law. This was the first case. So when there's a first case, what do they call it? There's no precedent. There's no precedent. So to be the one who's the trailblazer, right? Not every person is capable. Not every person feels they're strong enough to be the trailblazer. Once someone blazes the trail, then already other people can go through that trail. Right? There's a story about the Basi Yosef, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo, that he was having a difficulty with a certain Rambam. He didn't understand the Rambam's psak. And he struggled with it for about 2 weeks. He struggled with it until eventually, Min HaShamayim, he came up with the answer. The next day, he was in the Beis Midrash. He was in the house of study. And he heard 2 yeshiva students discussing this particular Rambam. And one of the students asked the question that he had struggled with for weeks. And the other student gave him the answer that it took Rav Yosef Karo a few weeks to get. I don't know how he realized it, but the story goes that he eventually realized that once he had opened the portal, once he had opened the gate, the flow, once he'd opened the berries, he was the first one to do it. So then others could also go in, like we say about Avram Avinu. And Avram Avinu's Mesiras Nefesh, specifically Yitzchak Avinu's Mesiras Nefesh. Yitzchak Avinu's self-sacrifice opened the port for the self-sacrifice of the Jews throughout history to give up their lives for Kodesh Baruch. That's how on Rosh Hashanah we mention Zoicher HaPriest. Kodesh Baruch who remembers the priest that Yitzchak Avinu did.
And you also see the framework outlined of teshuvah, of being able to begin that process from the sins of Lot.
From who?
From the sins of Lot. Her great grandfather.
Yes.
And because it's where the sin began at. And
what began?
The sin began at with Lot and his daughters, and the descendants from there, were the Moabites, and you see the progression of what Teshuvah can attain in the change of attitude and heart and spirituality from a place of sin to a place of acceptance.
That's right.
Within the mercy of Hashem.
That's right. That's right. And Ruth the Moabitess, became the great grandmother of David HaMelech. She became the Mashiach came through her. David HaMelech, Mashiach comes from David HaMelech, came through her. Getting back to what we started at the shiur by saying that the self-sacrifice of the Jew, that a Jew is commanded to give up his life, is beyond seichel. We see that from the whole story of the Akedah Yitzchak. And the Rebbe brings this out in one of his sichos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Avram Avinu, right? Ko tiyeh zarecha, right? Look up at the stars. This is how your seed will be. Your seed that you will bring into the world will be new seed, not Yishmael. Avram requested Yishmael should be that seed. Hashem said no. You're going to have a child, and your offspring will be like the stars, like the sand in the season, very numerous. And then Hashem commanded Avram to bring Yitzchak up as a sacrifice. Avram thought to actually sacrifice him. Hashem never said that. Hashem said, bring him up. And then Hashem said, take him down. But Avram didn't know that. Avram had a nevuah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bring Yitzchak Avinu up as a sacrifice. And when his servants, he went with Yitzchak, with Eliezer was his Eved. There was another one too. Remember who the other servant was? No. What are you going with? Was it Eliezer and Yishmael? No, I don't think so. Shmuel was already gone. He said to the Na'arim, the young men with Avram asked Avram, where are you going? He said, you stay with the donkeys, and me and Yitzchak, we're going to go to the mountain. V'nelcha ad Ko. Avram says to them, we're going to go to Ko. Ko means thus, yonder. It can have numerous meanings, but the Midrash says Avram was referring to that bracha. And Hashem said, Ko tiyeh zarecha, thus shall be your seed. And now in Avram's mind, he's being commanded to sacrifice Yitzchak, who is his seed. What will happen to the Ko? What will happen to that blessing? It's against the entire blessing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me. And Avram also knew that, he was teaching people all along not to sacrifice their children. They were doing that. That's what the idol worshippers were doing. It was totally against his philosophy, against his understanding. Nevertheless, that's what Hashem said.
And Abraham understood that, that this was that Hashem gave Abraham the promise of his descendants and being a great nation. He also understood that this was Hashem's problem, because Hashem was a keeper of his covenants, and it was as much of a test to Abraham of who Hashem was as Abraham's obedience.
Right.
and in the scheme of creation, this was a time where Hashem could show Abraham who Hashem was and the keeper of the covenants, and Abraham also understood that somehow Hashem was going to work this all out, and that he would still have the promise of being the father of the nations.
Well, the Rebbe says in the Sikha that this was actually against, in Avram's mind, this was against the very mission for which Hashem commanded Avram to go to Eretz Yisrael. Avram obviously understood that we have to make this world a dwelling place for our fathers, Baruch Hu, through Torah and mitzvahs, and his children, his descendants are going to be the ones who are going to be given the Torah and the mitzvahs. And now, this very blessing of his descendants, who are going to come through Yitzchak, he now has to sacrifice Yitzchak. It's against the whole mission. Nevertheless, he did it. And that's a sacrifice that's beyond seichel. That's the sacrifice of a Jew that a Jew can make, even though it doesn't make any sense. He does it. This is what Hashem wants. This is what he does. That's what the Rebbe says in the Sikha. That's the level of the self-sacrifice of Yitzchak. If we look, though, in history, I think the Rebbe also points this out, not in the sense of the murder bombers. I once called them suicide bombers, but someone corrected me. They're murder bombers. They're doing it to get a reward. They believe falsely that they're going to have some type of reward from their actions, and because of that reward, they do it. Or even if someone isn't interested in the reward, they're part of a certain nation, and their nation has a goal, and by them fighting in a war, let's say a U.S. Army a U.S. Army person going into World War II, knowing that he's maybe giving up his life and actually giving up he's fighting for democracy, he's fighting for freedom. There's a certain goal. That's what his nation represents, and he's a member of that nation. So there's a certain goal. Here, though, with Avram and Yitzchak, it was against the goal. It was against the actual mission itself. And it wasn't for the sake of any reward. Nevertheless, that's the self-sacrifice a Jew can have. It's beyond safe. How do we get back to that? Yeah, I don't know. Because the Nefesh Elokis, the godly soul, runs away, right? Because we were talking about how a spiritual death is worse than a physical death. We're talking about the pasuk from Torah that says that a Moabite can never become a convert, a male Moabite, because the Moabites cause the Jewish people to sin, while the Mitzrayim, the Egyptians, they can become converts after 3 generations, because even though they caused the Jews to die, it was a physical death. And a spiritual death, that's one of the proofs of the Torah, that a spiritual death is worse than a spiritual death. And the godly soul senses this. And therefore it runs away from anything that's against godliness. And its whole desire is for godliness, and to make the world vessels for godliness. The kol gasois v'chumrius yeshus v'tzius hanefesh v'amis. And the blood, on the other hand, the gasus, the coarseness, v'chumrius yeshus, and the material selfishness, the material existence, the feeling of the ego, umetzios, and the existence of the nefesh ba'amis is the opposite. Haru mechasu masni umalim, and therefore the nefesh ba'amis covers and hides over the hergesh, the nefesh elokis. It hides over this feeling and consciousness of the nefesh elokis. V'pshitusu And in more simple language, as the Geschmack from Welt, the Geschmack of this world, the pleasure that a person has from this world is Mechasel Masdir Oif den Hergesh Eloki, covers over the feelings of godliness. And that's what world is. World is Melashon Halem, hiddenness. Shezeu Hefech HaKavana Mamish. And this is the exact opposite. Mimasha Haisa Kavana Elyon B'Brios Oilmos. This is the exact opposite of the reason why Hashem created the world. Then he said, Kodesh Baruch Hu, because the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants that this world should be a place where he can reveal himself. And that's Al Yidei Avodas Ha'adam B'Guf V'Nefesh V'Hamish. And that's through a person being in the world, serving Hashem, and using his animal soul and his body to serve Hashem. And to be in this world specifically for the purpose of purifying and elevating it. That's the purpose of creation. And what comes out if a person doesn't exercise self-control and they let their nefesh bahamis, their animal soul, rule them, it comes out to be the opposite, God forbid. That the world hides over the truth, the light of truth. V'nis'ava v'nisgashem kol kaf ad shenechsar etzlo kol chush me'hergis hanigra feeling binyanim aruchnim shezeh ba b'sibas hanefesh l'bahamis shehu kavua u'mushrash binyan ha'olam v'zehu kol mahuso v'inyanim u'behem yega v'yachshoy v'yidaber b'chayus b'hergish mit agroise geschmack Asher hergish zeh beklalusoy befrat inyan hanoyam the geschmack yesh lo bezeh hu shavla las hergish beruchanim. Now we'll translate and explain. The whole purpose of the creation is that a person should be in this world, and that is through Torah and mitzvahs. He should light up his mind and his heart, and his action should be a vehicle for who he really is, his godly soul. But if a person doesn't exercise their godly soul to control themselves, so it comes out the exact opposite. That the olam, the world, from lashon halem, from the root of hiding, hides over the light of truth. And his nefesh bahamis, his animal soul, becomes thick and coarse and material so much, he becomes so much thick and coarse and material. That he completely gets covered over and forgets, and it becomes nechser etzlo. It becomes lacking by him any feeling in ruchniistic things, any feeling in spirituality. Doesn't have it. He becomes thick and coarse. And this comes about through the coarsening of the nefesh bahamis. That the nefesh bahamis is so rooted and so involved in this world. And that's all it cares about. And that's what it thinks about. And that's what it talks about. And that's what it feels. With a große Geschmack, with a great desire and a passion. Asher hergezu b'klalusan. And this feeling of passion for worldly things covers over and negates the feeling of passion for spiritual things. Like we said, it's a seesaw. If you're going to be if you're going to take the spiritual seriously and godliness seriously, and your avodah, what you need to do in this world seriously, you'll be able to control your passions. You'll be able to direct and train your animal soul to conduct itself in a normal in a normal, in a righteous fashion, you keep yourself on a tight leash because you know the truth. But if you don't make an effort to do that, the world is all around you. You have a nefesh Bahamis. The nefesh Bahamis, in its nature, wants things of this world, just like an animal, and the nefesh Bahamis will take over. On the lashon of the person becomes thick. It's one of the lashons that the Friedrich Rebbe uses. I once heard from, I don't remember who it was, and he told me though that he was once in yeshiva, and he was thinking, who is going to like be his mashpia? Who's going to be his mashpia in the yeshiva? Who's going to be like someone he's going to go to for spiritual guidance? For guidance, how to be a better Jew. And there was a certain person he was considering, and then this person was giving a shiur, and he was talking about thickening, and he used an example of kugel. He used an example of kugel. And this person told me, said that he didn't like that example. He felt that example itself showed a certain coarseness by the mashpia. He could have said a cloud, right? A cloud also, it hides the light. You have to talk about a kugel. You have to talk about a piece of kugel. There was once a certain tzaddik. I don't remember his name. It was a Chabad Oived. He was called an Oived. An Oived, as opposed to a maskil, there's two types of Hasidim. A maskil and an Oived. There's also people that are not on maskil or an Oived. They can be Hasidim. But there's two types of distinguishing features that you could point out by a certain special quality, by certain Hasidim. Oh, he's a maskil. Meaning you want to know something about Hasidus? Ask him. He's a maskil. He has seich. He can tell you answers. He can explain things in Hasidus. And then there's a person, he's an Oived. He's a person who's worked on himself. He's trained his nefesh Bahamis to be a nice animal, to do the things that the nefesh Elokis wants. He constrains himself. That's an Oived, a person who does avoiding, davens with feeling, and his not necessarily his seichel is so great, but you can just see he's an authentic person that he really cares. He really cares a lot. That's an Oived. And the Friedrich Rebbe writes in it's brought in this. We have the sefer here. Something about a chassid. Once upon a chassid brings a story over there that his father told him. He understood from his father that an Oived was more precious than his father, than a maskil. So there's once a certain Oived, a certain chassid, that he was very serious about his avodas Hashem. And he lived a very, very austere life because he understood that if he would be a glutton, he would become thick, and the coarseness of his animal soul would prevent the shining of the light of his godly soul into his being. So he lived a very, very austere life. And on his deathbed, he had charata. He was upset, and he said to his student, he said, I was too austere. He said, if I wouldn't have been so austere, I would have taken better care of my health. Maybe I would live another day. And I would be able to put on tefillin one more time. And that mitzvah of putting on tefillin would be worth all these skafia that he did all over the years. All the self-constraint that he constrained himself wasn't worth one time to put on tefillin. So you can see the recognition that this person had of the greatness of mitzvah in this world. Because austerity, it's a spiritual avodah, right? You're working on your body, but it's because you realize your body, if you don't train your body, and if you give your body everything it wants, your body's going to become the ruler. Just like in food. Shalom. Just like in food, just like in eating, right? If you don't eat sugar, so you don't eat sugar. But if you eat sugar, you want more. And eventually, sugar, you become an addict. Not everybody, but a lot of people. So too, you have to practice austerity, right? What is the Mishnah Pirkei Avos say? State water and salt, bread and salt. What is it? Water and bread you should eat. Bread and water. Mayim. No, lechem imelach and water. Bread and salt and water. Live a life of Torah. It'll be good for you. Two different shalom. Two different expressions that'll be good for you. One meaning it'll be good for you in this world, and it'll be good for you in the next world. The Rebbe says, our avoid in this generation is to eat healthy. You don't have to be so austere, right? You don't have to. There used to be people that would do what's it called? Sigufin? They would punish their body. Baal Shem Tov said, no. Don't punish your body. Your body, help your body. Be good to your body. Have a strong, healthy body. Because you need a strong, healthy body to serve a Kodesh Baruch. I thought we would finish chapter 3 today.